Hawaii, a once completely isolated group of islands with near boundless materials that would eventually become nearly unrecognizable due to the destruction of the land caused by foreign influence. But before we get into that, it's important to know about the history of pre-colonial Hawaii. Hawaii is a group of islands that was formed by volcanic activity and was left relatively isolated for millions of years. That was up until around nearly 400 years after Jesus was born, when a group of Polynesian sailors set out to find what would now be known as Hawaii. Once arriving at the island, they quickly began to develop their own customs and society. And now, Isaac, you may be wondering, are these the people you mentioned that would eventually come to destroy the Hawaiian landscape? And to that, I say, chill out, I'll get to that eventually, goddamn. The native Hawaiians actually sought to protect the land, seeing it as their main source of life, as the island provided everything that they could possibly need to survive. With this in mind, the native Hawaiians made sure that everyone had access to the resources that they needed, as this was entirely possible within the near utopian island that they lived on. While food, water, and shelter were in abundance year-round, water was still controlled and distributed by the konohiki of every district. This distribution system in place ensured that everyone had access to the water that they needed, and made sure that no one was able to control all of the water. But that all changed when the Fire Nation attacked. Americans first arrived in Hawaii in the 1700s and became quickly enamored with the abundance of materials, namely sandalwood. Once the sandalwood market started to die out in Hawaii, the Americans resorted to importing and producing sugar on the same land. They quickly found that sugar was an extremely useful source of revenue, and like sandalwood, opened trade with China. The introduction of sugarcane crops in Hawaii piqued the interest in a lot of foreign investors, who would open large plantations in hopes of making a lot of money. These sugarcane crops, however, were extremely resource heavy to grow, and required a lot of attention. With this in mind, the plantation owners sought to keep as many resources to themselves as possible in order to sustain the land. They achieved this by exploiting the lack of water legislation by redirecting the water using tools such as dams, wells, and flumes. Because Hawaii was essentially lawless for Americans at the time, this pretty much granted plantation owners near exclusive access to any water sources that may have been on their land. This left many Hawaiians without an access to a water source, leaving them having to pay for water through the plantation owners. This only worsened the situation, however, as plantation owners soon realized that they would be able to exploit the water sources without any repercussions. This would only change after the demand for sugar decreased heavily after the Civil War in 1861. This would lead to the post-plantation era. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, thank God those sugar plantations went out of business and now there's no more water distribution problems in Hawaii. No. Nope. While the demand for sugar from the state may have decreased significantly, there is still plenty of water distribution problems within Hawaii. One example of this was during the fight for the Waihola Ditch between the Windward residents and the Leeward agricultural companies back in the 90s. The reason this conflict arose was because it was found that Leeward agricultural companies were siphoning water from Windward river sources, which made the residents a little not too happy, as rivers were starting to dry out on the windward side. Though back in the early plantation days, most courts would rule in favor of plantations almost immediately. This was an extensive court battle between the residents and the agricultural companies. The ruling of this 10-year-long court case was that the people and the agricultural companies would have to share ownership over the river sources. This meant that the agricultural companies would no longer be able to redirect the water sources without the consent of the residents. This case may have taken a lot longer to have been resolved, or may not have been at all had it not been for the creation of the Commission on Water Resource Management of Hawaii in 1987. This commission has sat to resolve water distribution related incidents for the past 33 years, but sometimes faces problems in regards to its efficiency and willingness to listen to the people. And you're probably thinking to yourself, wow, smart guys, since you're so fast to criticize the Hawaiian government, why don't you give us some of your good ideas to resolve these water conflicts? Well, I got you one right here. Bam! I'm just gonna hope I edited a good idea right here, because I don't really got one right now. And yes, this idea is already in the testing stages within Hawaii, but I feel as if a more widespread use of this technology could be just the resolution Hawaii needs for its water problems. While this technology is relatively expensive at the moment, the money it takes to invest in this field could easily replace the money it takes to delegate water distribution issues. And considering that we live on an island surrounded by salt water, this idea becomes even more convenient to invest in. As it turns out, water desalination is already a well-researched field, and Hawaii now just needs to further develop the infrastructure to incorporate this on the island. So yeah, take that hypothetical question person that I made up to convenience the flow of this video. What are you gonna do about it now? Okay, you did make some points, bro. I get it now. Hey, I appreciate that, man. Also, ignore the fact that I just randomly get a haircut in the middle of the video. I don't know what that's about. So much for continuity, am I right, boys? Up top.